The Locust Years, 1936. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Ruth Golding. Speech given by Winston Churchill to the House of Commons, 12th of November, 1936. I have, with some friends, put an amendment on the paper. It is the same as the amendment which I submitted 2 years ago, and I have put it in exactly the same terms, because I thought it would be a good thing to remind the House of what has happened in these 2 years. Our amendment in November 1934 was the culmination of a long series of efforts by private members and by the Conservative party in the country to warn His Majesty's Government of the dangers to Europe and to this country which were coming upon us through the vast process of German rearmament, then already in full swing. The speech which I made on that occasion was much censured as being alarmist by leading Conservative newspapers, and I remember that Mr. Lloyd George congratulated the Prime Minister, who was then Lord President, on having so satisfactorily demolished my extravagant fears. What would have been said, I wonder, if I could 2 years ago have forecast to the House the actual course of events? Suppose we had then been told that Germany would spend for 2 years £800 million a year upon warlike preparations; that her industries would be organised for war as the industries of no country have ever been; that by breaking all treaty engagements she would create a gigantic air force and an army based on universal compulsory service, which by the present time, in 1936, amounts to upwards of 39 divisions of highly equipped troops, including mechanised divisions of almost unmeasured strength, and that behind all this there lay millions of armed and trained men, for whom the formations and equipment are rapidly being prepared to form another 80 divisions in addition to those already perfected. Suppose we had then known that by now 2 years of compulsory military service would be the rule, with a preliminary year of training in labour camps; that the Rhineland would be occupied by powerful forces and fortified with great skill, and that Germany would be building, with our approval, signified by treaty, a large submarine fleet. Suppose we had also been able to foresee the degeneration of the foreign situation, our quarrel with Italy, the Italo-German association, the Belgian declaration about neutrality, which, if the worst interpretation of it proves to be true, so greatly affects the security of this country, and the disarray of the smaller powers of Central Europe. Suppose all that had been forecast, why, no one would have believed in the truth of such a nightmare tale. Yet just 2 years have gone by, and we see it all in broad daylight. Where shall we be this time 2 years? I hesitate now to predict. Let me say, however, that I will not accept the mood of panic or of despair. There is another side, a side which deserves our study, and can be studied without derogating in any way from the urgency which ought to animate our military preparations. The British Navy is, and will continue to be, incomparably the strongest in Europe. The French army will certainly be, for a good many months to come, at least equal in numbers and superior in maturity to the German army. The British and French air forces together are a very different proposition from either of those forces considered separately. While no one can prophesy, it seems to me that the Western democracies, provided they are knit closely together, would be tolerably safe for a considerable number of months ahead. No one can say to a month or two, or even a quarter or two, how long this period of comparative equipoise will last. But it seems certain that during the year 1937 the German army will become more numerous than the French army, and very much more efficient than it is now. It seems certain that the German air force will continue to improve upon the long lead which it already has over us, particularly in respect of long-distance bombing machines. The year 1937 will certainly be marked by a great increase in the adverse factors which only intense efforts on our part can, to effective extent, countervail. The efforts at rearmament which France and Britain are making will not by themselves be sufficient. It will be necessary for the Western democracies, even at some extension of their risks, to gather round them all the elements of collective security or of combined defensive strength against aggression, if you prefer, as I do myself, to call it so, which can be assembled on the basis of the covenant of the League of Nations. Thus, I hope, we may succeed in again achieving a position of superior force, and then will be the time, not to repeat the folly which we committed when we were all powerful and supreme, but to invite Germany to make common cause with us in assuaging the griefs of Europe and opening a new door to peace and disarmament. I now turn more directly to the issues of this debate. Let us examine our own position. No one can refuse his sympathy to the Minister for the Co-ordination of Defence. From time to time my right honourable friend lets fall phrases or facts which show that he realises, more than any one else on that bench, it seems to me, the danger in which we stand. One such phrase came from his lips the other night. He spoke of "the years that the locust hath eaten." Let us see which are these years that the locust hath eaten, even if we do not pry too closely in search of the locusts who have eaten these precious years. For this purpose we must look into the past. From the year 1932, certainly from the beginning of 1933, when Herr Hitler came into power, it was general public knowledge in this country that serious rearmament had begun in Germany. There was a change in the situation. 3 years ago, at the Conservative Conference at Birmingham, that vigorous and faithful servant of this country, Lord Lloyd, moved the following resolution: that this Conference desires to record its grave anxiety in regard to the inadequacy of the provisions made for imperial defence. That was 3 years ago, and I see from the Times report of that occasion that I said, "During the last 4 or 5 years the world had grown gravely darker. We have steadily disarmed, partly with a sincere desire to give a lead to other countries, and partly through the severe financial pressure of the time. But a change must now be made. We must not continue longer on a course in which we alone are growing weaker, while every other nation is growing stronger." The resolution was passed unanimously, with only a rider informing the Chancellor of the Exchequer that all necessary burdens of taxation would be cheerfully borne. There were no locusts there, at any rate. I am very glad to see the Prime Minister, Mr. Baldwin, restored to his vigour, and to learn that he has been recuperated by his rest, and also, as we hear, rejuvenated. It has been my fortune to have ups and downs in my political relations with him, the downs on the whole predominating perhaps; but at any rate we have always preserved agreeable personal relations, which, so far as I am concerned, are greatly valued. I am sure he would not wish in his conduct of public affairs that there should be any shrinking from putting the real issues of criticism which arise, and would certainly proceed in that sense. My right honourable friend has had all the power for a good many years, and therefore there rests upon him inevitably the main responsibility for everything that has been done or not done, and also the responsibility for what is to be done or not done now. So far as the air is concerned, this responsibility was assumed by him